How did you find yourself involved with the whole Brisbane punk scene?
Well, I was born and bred in the place and ended up working in a record shop called Skinny's, which was in the arcade just up from White Chairs.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was already playing in a couple of punk bands around town, and I was in a band called Outer Limits, and we managed to get the support at the National Hotel for Iggy Pop and the New Christs.
Okay.
And we had such a good time that I didn't turn up the next day to open the record shop. So I got the sack, but then then I got a job at Triple Z. And of course that started the Black Assassins, because we're all Triple Z people.
How much was 4ZZZ, an influence on kind of everything that was happening in the early 80s, like in the Brisbane scene?
Well, it was crucial, it was crucial. It was the only alternative, and it educated a lot of people. It educated me in all sorts of areas. I'd come from the second cheapest Christian Brothers school in Brisbane, and so I knew nothing about anything, and Triple Z educated me in everything to do with race, gender, anything. And we were living in a police state. Anyone that worked there in any capacity would get raided by the cops, and they knew that we knew. You were either acquiescent or you were going to try and do something to wake the rest of the state up. And punk was partially about that. Punk was also about just the fact that in Brisbane before that, there was A, no gigs apart from Festival Hall, and B, if there was a gig at your local scout hall or something, it was a band doing Led Zeppelin covers. It was just such an exciting, tremendously, to start with, inclusive thing before any sort of punk uniform and that bullshit came along. Just the idea that if you're any sort of person who was outside the deadened mainstream, you could get up and have a go. I mean, that was the whole thing with the Assassins. Bloody hopeless. Worst band in Brisbane's history. But by jingoes, we put on a good show.
Getting back to the whole the politics of the day, obviously the Black Assassins was kind of a reaction against that political environment. Was it simply just a kind of, big fuck you to JB Peterson and the government and the police, or did you have, say, a more kind of pointed commentary or trying to get across?
Yeah, we didn't the politics wasn't confined to Queensland.
Yeah.
I mean, we had songs about revolutionaries in Africa, like Swapo, and we had songs about, the royal family, our Azaria song remains a classic.
Yeah.
So it was, it wasn't perhaps necessarily as straightforward as, say, Razor with Task Force or something like that.
Yeah.
But it was still more of a case of, wake up and look around you, because the mainstream was deadened, it was comatose. And that's just the way the government wanted it. I still get frustrated with people of my parents' generation, because they were the ones who kept telling us when we were kicking up a stink, no, everything's fine, and no, there's no brothels in the city, and, it's like, that's wrong. Why are you doing this?
You mentioned there about, feeling that kind of everything was a bit hard done by at the time, and everyone else was a bit kind of passive to it. I mean, and looking back, researching about what was happening at that time, I mean, police brutality seemed a kind of a common theme.
Well, like I said, if you looked different, once the cops figured out it wasn't long hairs who were the problem anymore, it was really, really short hairs.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, if you looked different, they'd come after you. And it wasn't just the cops. This was the general Queensland population would do that. I mean, this is Brisbane too, you know. But also, like I said, at Triple Z, they knew every single person who did a show there. Our house, the house I was living in at St. Lucia, got raided by the drug squad.
Yeah.
Everyone got raided by the drug squad. It was just blatant. And then, of course, you know, the more the station kicked up a fuss, and then when it got to Bogger Road and that sort of stuff, well, then they just really hated us.
How did punk really come about? I mean, if you research it, you get names like, you know, Iggy Pop, like Stooges, MC5 and all that. But in your opinion, how did it find its way into Brisbane?
Well, the Saints had done it first.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, there was always this subset of music fans pre-punk, and all we wanted, even then, in the early 70s, all we wanted was loud, fast, noisy stuff. And so, yeah, like you say, you'd go to Iggy and the MC5 and outfits like that, or even like the Saints did, go back to Australian garage stuff from the 60s. But, so they were the first. They proved it could be done. And then when the English and American stuff started coming through, it was like, as often happens, people around the world getting the same idea at the same time, or a similar idea. So it wasn't alien to those of us that wanted it. It still caused a big fight at Triple Z when it happened, because a lot of the people who'd set the station up were sort of, you know, mellow dudes who were into sound quality, and they weren't quite prepared for it. But as soon as the idea that you could get up and do it if you could find somewhere to do it, that meant there were people that were going to give it a crack. Yeah. And it also meant that there was an obvious state to kick against. You know, whereas the rest of Australia, you might think, what the hell have they got to whinge about? And in that sense, the Brisbane punk scene was great like that. It's just a pity that also meant it was that much smaller than a city that size should have been, because the alternative had always been like that in Brisbane, smaller than a city of, you know, a million or two should have been. And that meant it got a bit insular really quickly.
Yeah.
But that's how it came through. But keeping in mind, it didn't just, you know, like I said to start with, it wasn't a uniform. You know, to start with, like the Go-Betweens were a punk band. It was the idea that you could get up and do it. It wasn't anything about punk means, you know, uniform with spiky hair and stuff. It was anything goes. And that's why Willsteed and the McLeods and those lunatics in Pork and those sort of bands would get up and do it, because that was the idea.
That DIY kind of thing that you hear so much about, that's the whole point of giving it a go.
Absolutely. And fanzines and clothes, and it was sort of an idea that you could apply sort of across the board.
Obviously, you were one of those people that kind of got up and gave it a go. Looking back at it all, from my perspective, the Black Assassins seem a bit of an odd band. I mean, the balaclavas, the song titles.
Well, it was incredible fun. It was adrenaline.
Yeah.
Like, we became I would suggest we were the fastest pack-up in the city. You know, just from the number of times we'd be playing under someone's house for a party and the crowd go, "Cops!" We could pack up our gear like within a minute, and there'd be nothing there. But, you know, the fact that we couldn't necessarily play didn't bother the rest of them. It used to drive me up the wall, because, okay, admittedly I'm on drums, you don't have to tune them or anything, but Jesus, the rest of them, a couple of them are even rhythmically challenged, you know. It doesn't matter, you know. It was the point of getting up there and doing it. It was you know, hopefully inspiring to other people, which was the whole point.